All right, on a long drive here, so I'm gonna make a video. Hating life right now, guys. Absolutely fucking hating life. I said F too early in the video, didn't I? Oh well. If I get one view on this, I'll be stoked, so fuck it. Yeah, I'm really hating life with the real estate, but there is a big positive to it, though. There is a big silver lining. And I'm not the kind of candy ass that just looks for silver linings and everything. But in this case, there really is, because the end result could be great. I'm selling 2 residential properties, and I'm buying a commercial property, and I'm really excited about getting out of residential. But the reason I'm not getting out of residential entirely, but I'm getting out of these 2 properties. But the reason why I'm excited about getting out of it is because of shit like what I'm dealing with right now. And this is the worst situation I've dealt with. This is really like the nightmare stuff. I should have done a video where I showed this house in its worst state. And I could have shown you the absolute just disgusting work I was doing last night, by myself, you know? Now, a lot of this shit I'm hiring out, of course, and I'm taking a bath on this, my costs are going to be over $10,000 easily. I mean, if I can keep it under $20,000, I'll probably be pretty happy, because I'm selling the house, so I'll recover the money pretty quick. But there's certain work that literally there's nobody that does this kind of work, or they're hard to find. And if I can do it myself, I will, because I don't really have a 9-to-5 job. I'm pretty much retired. I'm just living off my real estate. So I do, just on principle, there's certain things I won't hire out if I'm capable of doing it, because I'm not an invalid. But anyway, I'm there tearing up these carpets, and they are fucking soaked in cat piss, man. I'm trying to get up the carpet pads. I can only get up so much because I didn't know enough to bring like a scraping tool, and some of these pads are just like plastered to the ground, to the floor, the concrete floor, with cat piss. Now, some of it's like the glue they use, but that comes out pretty easily. But I have like whole sections where it is just plastered because so much cat piss soaked in, and the nature of this padding material, it just became like a sticky substance that just stuck to the card. The smell of this place, I couldn't even imagine. My poor wife was helping me. She's like mopping up, while I'm working on the carpeted floor, she's mopping up the hard floors. There's like piss and shit everywhere. I have no idea how people could have lived like this. And this was after we had already hired somebody to take all their stuff out. They left like stuff, like hoarding level shit. Like the place was just full of shit. We paid like $2,500 to have somebody come and get all the trash out and all the stuff they left behind, which, I mean, in my opinion, it's all trash. It's all trash now for sure, because that's where it went. It was the city dump. But anyway, that's not even what what this video's about. Oh, so yeah, and then right now I'm driving to a comptroller field office to try to get my LLC reinstated. I'm sick, by the way, because my dumbass let my LLC lapse, because when I moved, I forgot to update the address, so I wasn't getting reminders on these reports, and they weren't coming. Now, keep in mind, I'm not making an excuse, I'm just explaining what happened. I should have been filing these reports, but the reports for me are so insignificant because I'm not making any money. It's just an LLC to hold the property. So my report literally takes like 30 seconds. You put your name your LLC, check, I didn't make any money, send it in. So this isn't something like top of mind, like filing my income taxes or whatever. So in the absence of getting that reminder, I just completely blew it and just didn't do that report for like 4 years. It just never popped into my mind. And so I'm selling this property that's under that LLC, and a week before, now, again, it's kind of hard for me to blame anyone else.
2 miles, take exit 45B for I-20 East toward Dallas.
Because this is completely my fault. But the title company decided to not check on this or tell me about it until a week before closing. And so I go online to file the reports, and well, of course, I'm like 4 years behind. So they only let me do online the first 2 reports, which was like 21, 22. And then they had shut off my account online, so I can't do any further ones. I have to do it manually. So initially, I call and they say I got to mail it in. This was last Thursday. Boom, I mail it in. Express mail gets there today. But then I started to realize, like, there's no way that's going to work. Like, when stuff's going through regular mail, that shit's like going to sit in a mail room probably for a week. It's going to go through whatever. I mean, it's just not going to happen in the amount of time I need it to happen. So this morning I started making calls and I found out that my one chance is I have to go in person at the Dallas field office, which is pretty far from where I actually live. It's like an hour drive. I live in a suburb. No fucking way I'm living in the city. So now I'm doing an hour drive to Dallas to hope that I can get this thing fixed. And then that's not even the end. I then have to take the letter that they're supposed to give me a letter.
45B, then
Hold on.
use the left lane to take the ramp to I-20 East.
Sorry, I've never been here before, so I'm doing GPS. It's going to interrupt us. But anyway, so I got to pay the comptroller. They give me a letter. I get to the Secretary of State. That all has to happen by Friday close. So good luck with that. Now, I'm actually hopeful now that it can happen, now that I realize I can drive in and do this thing in person. So we'll see. But
use the left lane to take the ramp to I-20 East.
There's so much shit going on. And then all throughout this thing, I've also been looking for my commercial property. So that's another thing I've had to do. So I've had to do calls with brokers. I'm looking online at properties. I've never owned a commercial property, so it's stressful. Like, is this going to be a good deal? So yeah, pretty stressful time in my life. Also trying to lose weight, which puts a lot of stress on you. That has kind of gone sideways a little bit, especially this last couple days, because I'm sick and I had to go do this hard labor. Anyway, you don't care about that. What is this video? This video is actually supposed to be on something completely different. That was just the introduction explaining where I'm driving to while I do the video. This video is actually about the friggin' shit with the Europeans. I know I'm like kind of obsessed with this, but the obsession comes from, it's disappointing. It's like hurtful, you know? The biggest hate and resentment comes from like a place of hurt where you really like, you know, loved something, and then it turns out that thing is either not what you thought it was, which is the case here, or you find out that those people that you loved actually don't love you, and that's also the case here. So me being a history buff, and I'm a conservative, you know, I'm all into like the old ways. I love European history, you know. I love Europe. I love Western civilization as a concept. And so the way that Europe has evolved to be like a bunch of spineless weasel socialists that despise the U.S. is just really disappointing. But in particular, what I wanted to address is this shit about what are some of the things that the Europeans really like to harp on, because in their insecurity, you know, they have to find ways to tear down the U.S. and Americans. And one of their favorite ones is the obesity thing. So, as I just alluded to, the number one issue here is let's say that all of their criticisms are valid, which we're going to get into them, and we can already say at the top that it is valid that the U.S. does have an obesity problem. But the very fact that this is something that they want to harp on, you know, just shows that they hate the U.S. So why should we be spending? You know, and they hate Americans, so why should we be spending on their defense? Why should we be doing anything for them? If they're out there trying to shit talk us and try to come up with every reason why we suck and they're awesome, does that sound like somebody you want to be doing things for? Somebody that you want to be paying for their defense, even though they can pay for it themselves? No. So you gotta understand the shit just comes from a place of deep insecurity and resentment at the fact that they ruled the world for about 500 years. They dominated in every sphere of life. And then what they ended up doing was they fucked around and they basically destroyed themselves in 2 world wars. And that was completely their fault. The U.S. had nothing to do with it. The U.S. didn't want to be in the war. They didn't want either war to happen. They didn't even want to get in when it happened. And guess what they did do? They came in and saved these people's asses both times. You know, and we can get into some whole debate about that, about how much the U.S. Contributed to their victories. They, of course, want to diminish it and say the U.S. didn't do shit. Well, it's kind of like the same situation with Ukraine, except that in the two world wars, we even directly intervened. But before we intervened, it was pretty much the same situation as Ukraine. Yes, they deserve credit because they were the ones dying on the battlefield. They deserve a hell of a lot of credit for that. But without American support and supplies, they would have been screwed. I mean, if you look at Lend-Lease, if you look at the amount of support, material support going to Britain and the Soviet Union from the U.S. prior and still during the U.S. intervention in the war, it's unprecedented in history. The U.S. was supplying the war. The U.S. was allowing Britain to survive. That's a fact. Based on like online debates, which, can you really base anything on that? But anyway, so it seems like a lot of people in Britain are unaware of this, or that's not, what their government tells them. But they were being propped up by the U.S. just like Ukraine is. Anyway, I'm once again off topic. The topic is obesity. And this is one of the things the Europeans want to attack us on. Now, this one is a tough one to defend because I wouldn't want to defend it fully. There is a certain aspect to, yes, there's an obesity problem. We really need to fix this. Yes, we need to fix our food. There is some hopeful things with the RFK in there. And so it is an issue. But we need to look at what the actual nature of the issue is, because it's almost, in reality, it's not about what the Europeans try to twist it into, of like a defect of the American character and all this kind of stuff. Like somehow it's tied into the other things they don't like about us. Like, we're fat because a lot of us are still Christian, unlike Europe. Or we're fat because we have rural areas, and they don't like rural people. And we're fat because even like stupid shit like we're fat because we have a right to bear arms. Like you'll see them like somehow tie like gun-toting fat people, two things that have absolutely nothing to do with each other. So they'll try to twist this problem we have into something far more degrading towards Americans than what the actual issue is. The actual issue is actually, it's a little bit of like being a victim of your own success. So as we know throughout history, the aristocracy tended to be overweight. Being overweight was virtually unknown amongst peasants because obviously the obvious reason is they didn't have enough food to be overweight. So the U.S. is so rich, and yes, look at the statistics. They are a lot richer than Europe right now. This gap between Americans and Europeans in wealth has fluctuated a little bit, but it's always been there. The U.S. is Americans as individuals and the U.S. as a country have always been richer than Europeans. But that gap has fluctuated from being like pretty close to parity to a pretty significant gap. And right now in 2025, we're actually at a period where it's a pretty significant gap. Americans are quite a bit richer. So I think European people, their information might be a little outdated. They're living in like the year 2000 when it was a much closer. They had achieved like pretty close to parity. But since then, the gap has spread back out to its like post World War II levels of a gap in wealth now. Once again, so there you have one factor is just that Americans have a lot of money and we pay a lot less taxes in them too. So not only is our income a lot higher than Europeans, but taxes in the U.S. are a lot lower than they are in Europe. So Americans have a lot of disposable income and they eat out a lot. And anytime you eat out a lot, you're taking in too many calories because restaurants are not in the business of making healthy food. they're in the business of making very delicious food. And what makes food delicious? Piling in a lot of fat, either in the form of butter or just fatty meat or whatever. But fat equals delicious, basically. And what else equals delicious? Sugar. So pretty much sugar and fat are the two things that make food more and more palatable, and they also make you overweight. So the simple fact that Americans can afford to eat out at restaurants, if you look at a place like Italy, which is a great place, don't get me wrong, but people say, oh, how do they have all this great food but they aren't fat? And it's not, and then they try to immediately attribute it to some kind of like character thing, like they're better than Americans. No, it's because they mostly eat at home. They have a whole culture of eating at home. Now, I'm sure they go to restaurants, but it's nowhere near as frequently as Americans, and that's the main factor right there. Essentially. And the other thing is just, we've created all this food that's basically junk, but if you think about it, it's a triumph in its own right in industry, entrepreneurship and stuff. You know, like all these great American companies that are making us fat, you know, Little Debbie and Coca-Cola and stuff. That part of it too is also like a victim of your own success. Like, the world has changed so much. Like, when you go into a grocery store, there's just aisle after aisle of super palatable, high-calorie foods that it took a modern industrial powerhouse and capitalist, you know, juggernaut to create all of this stuff. So we have all the stuff that we like. People like good tasting food, but unfortunately, good tasting food comes with it obesity. So I just feel like there needs to be more like explaining what's really going on, because we have these people out there that are very vocal about their resentments and how much they hate the U.S. And I feel like a lot of Americans are being influenced by this. They're saying, yeah, you're right. Yeah. And then internal politics plays a role too, because we have a whole political party that's essentially anti-American. So they're very receptive to anything that's anti-American. They're very quick to jump on anything the Europeans come up with that's anti-American. So the obesity problem is a problem. It's a problem that we need to fix. But in order to fix it, we're going to have to identify the real causes. And we need to tune out the nonsense from people that just hate Americans for other reasons. And they're trying to use the obesity epidemic as a way to impugn the character of Americans. And then if we want to go even longer, we could talk about how their criticisms of our healthcare system is largely bogus as well. You could always have better healthcare. I'm not saying that that's something that isn't open to criticism. But 70% of people that have employer-provided private healthcare are happy with it in polls. I think Europeans don't understand, and I think there's like a lot of propaganda in Europe. Like, I think these people are really like propagandized by their government to believe some things, because some of the stuff they think is like doesn't seem like there's a lot of critical thinking involved. Like, they actually seem to be of the belief that government-run healthcare is somehow better than private healthcare. I mean, come on, is anything the government does better than private anything? Are billionaires running around in buses, or are they driving in their private limousines and their private jets? I mean, anybody that has the choice goes with a private thing. They do the same thing with transportation. They're like, America doesn't have enough buses. They suck. Everybody has their own Lexus. It's like, yeah, like, that's because if anybody has a choice, they're going to drive their own Lexus, not a bus. That's why we don't have that much public transportation because we have so much money, more money than you, that we can afford our own vehicles and shit. We don't need public transportation. Now, there's some other factors that the U.S. is a lot more spread out. So, we're just a very large country with a lot of empty, quote unquote empty, but, rural land. So that's where public transportation starts to not make as much sense. There's just not as much walkability and so forth. Where there is congestion, where there is a lot of people stuffed together, like in New York, there is a lot of public transportation. So that's another just stupid criticism that's like lacks all context and stuff. There's a ton of them, but the healthcare one is a big one, because most people that have a job and have private insurance are happy with the private insurance. And if you want to find out what government healthcare would be, get on the VA, because I'm a veteran and I was on VA until I just decided to go to private insurance because it's better. So I'm a perfect example. I have access to free insurance, totally free insurance, and I choose to pay for private insurance because I have the money to do so. So I just find it laughable that anyone would sit here and extol the virtues of public, government-run healthcare. Like, that's the ideal. That's like the great thing we should be aspiring to. And Europe has it, and we don't. It's like, what? Now, again, there is valid criticism that can be made for anything, and our healthcare system's not an exception to that. There are cases where people end up getting financially screwed because they got sick and stuff like that. So it's not like I'm saying that we're immune to criticism. I'm just trying to add some context here and realize that a lot of people online just spewing stuff have no idea what they're talking about. They just really don't. But, all right, this was a particularly rambling one. This was just stream of consciousness. I gotta say, I'm not even really happy with how this video came out. I feel like I feel like my thoughts were very scattered in this video. So I apologize for that. But I think there is some stuff in here that's, some good information, some good points that you might consider, because you've probably only heard the perspective that, isn't it funny that you have the country that objectively, just by statistics, like completely objectively, is the most successful country in the world. The power of the economy is just unbelievable. All the innovation comes out of the U.S., like whatever's the new thing, it's coming out of the U.S., the internet, the cell phone revolution, and now AI. It's just, the U.S. is just objectively, by far, the most successful country in the world. And yet all you ever hear online from foreigners is how terrible we are. And you can't put two and two together that it's just resentment and jealousy. Come on, guys. Think for a second. But, yeah, that's all I got for now. See you.